Hello, and welcome to a brand new series. We have spent quite a bit of time in a New Testament epistle of the letter that Paul wrote to Timothy in 1 Timothy. And in the last 2 weeks, we've taken a little time to reflect upon Thanksgiving, and we thought about the lessons of going and being thankful, and I hope you had a truly blessed Thanksgiving time. And I've really been pondering for the past couple of weeks, what would be the next expositional study, the one to go through in detail and probably spend quite a few months on. And I just kept finding myself drawn back to the book of 2 Samuel in the Old Testament, a book of history, an important time in Israel's history. It's fascinating too. It's personal narrative. It's a detailed study of King David. It is a continuation, and maybe there are a few people listening that might remember some time back we actually went through the book of 1 Samuel. And I don't even remember the exact year that was, but some years back we did that first book. And so now we're going to come back and look at part 2 and the continuation of this really important story, and as always trying to apply the lessons to us today. So, I thought what we would do today is set a little background. I think it's important to frame the book, to think about where we left off. It's been a while since it is a continuation. And then we'll do just the beginning, opening of the book to get started. So let's look at the background for a little bit. Think about time frame. So we're talking 3,000 or so years ago. Around 1000 BC to around 970 BC. In terms of geography, we're going to see, maybe this is hopefully not a spoiler alert, but this is going to be the time when David is going to be the king of Israel. And there's an expansion of the kingdom. And so if we want to look at a map, we can think this is going to be the kingdom, and then it's going to be this expansion of the kingdom during King David's reign. While the book itself doesn't name the author, we know how the material was recorded. We have that book of 1 Samuel, the prophet, as well as the prophets Nathan and Gad, but it's named after the prophet Samuel. And again, it's 2 books. So even today we have sequels, if you will, a part 2. It's actually such a long book. The main reason for 2 books is just really sheer length of it. But the theme is the expansion of Israel. It's also going to be about a great time of victory and a lot of joys, personal joys in David's life. But there's going to be unspeakable sin and problems. And though David was a man after God's own heart, the narrative is true, and that's one of the things that I think makes the Bible so unique. It has the unvarnished truth. It's not a spin on it. It will have the great and momentous and most wonderful things about David, but it will also share the truth of the struggles that he had and the sin that he had. I think it's important, and I want to try to make this quick, but it's going to jump right into the middle of the story. So let's do a really quick lesson of how we get to this book of 2 Samuel. So, of course, Israel was held in bondage as slaves, but they were led out by Moses to the Promised Land, and we see how God established his covenant with them, and God was faithful to them. But we also see how Israel had failures. We had learned in the time of the judges that there was a lot of chaos. And so as we then transition to the book of Samuel, the first book of Samuel, we see the rise of a king. And the people wanted a king. They were struggling. Samuel was a prophet, and the king that arose that the people chose because of his appearance and his looks. He wasn't the best king, and that was King Saul. And he led the people. And there was also David. And we see David come into the picture, and he's a young man. He's not particularly big. He doesn't look the part as Saul looks the part of a leader. But he rises up and he has faith. We see him do things like the very, very famous story with the slaying of the giant Goliath, the battle with the Philistines. We also see, though, Saul deteriorate, and he loves David, but he has jealousy of David. There's times he wants to kill David, and he kind of descends into madness. But David always takes the high road, even when his own life is in danger. He won't touch the Lord's anointed. He won't touch Saul, and he's faithful and true. But in the end, he's an outcast, as 1 Samuel ends. And we also see the tragedy at the end of 1 Samuel, where Saul comes to his ultimate demise and his death. And that's where the story picks up. And you can definitely go back and read a lot more about it. That's an extremely short story of how we got to this point. But as it opens here, in the very first chapter, it says after the death of Saul. So that was recorded in the last 2 chapters of the first book of Samuel. And it says, now David, he had returned from striking down the Amalekites, and he remained 2 days in Ziklag. And so I actually was just curious about this. I have some modern day pictures of Ziklag, and it's a place that can be visited today. It just shows us, again, the Bible, geography, archaeology, history. It's there, and they have dug up the sites. And so it all aligns with that. But then this man enters. Now, we were talking about in the transition between the books about the loss of Saul, but David has been an outcast. David has been away. David doesn't know this. So this man comes, and on the 3rd day, behold, a man came from Saul's camp, and his clothes are torn, and dirt is on his head. So he was a sight. Also, there's probably something being told in his appearance here, because when there was a tragic loss at that time, people would tear their clothes. People would rub ashes or dirt or things on their head. And so, I think this is an indication. You ever see somebody coming with you, maybe the look on their face, their appearance, there's a knock on the door, you get the inkling there's some bad news coming. But he comes and he pays homage to David. He came to David, he fell to the ground, he paid homage, he showed him respect. But he has some terrible news to share. So David said to him, where do you come from? He said to him, well, I've escaped from the camp of Israel. And David said to him, well, how did it go? They had been in this very big battle. Just like if you were thinking about people you knew that were off to battle or dealing with something dangerous. How did it go? Tell me. And he answered, well, the people fled from the battle, and also many of the people have fallen and are dead. And Saul and his son Jonathan are also dead. Now, as readers, we know this news. This is part of the lesson from the first book. But David, this is new for him. He's hearing this news. And so there's a lot of implications of this. One, there's personal loss. So Saul, he was the king, but it was also a very personal relationship. One thing you see is that from the very beginning, when they first met, there was a kinship between Saul and David. David would play music for him. He soothed him. At times, that, Saul became jealous. It became irrational. But David still had a love for Saul, and so there was a personal relationship. But there was also another relationship. And I didn't share this in the history lesson from the first book, but you may recall it, that David had an extremely close friend. Jonathan was that. The Bible says there is a friend that's closer than a brother. And for David, his best friend, the man that he loved as a friend, that he was so close with, was his friend Jonathan. And so he lost Saul and he lost Jonathan. And, we're going to go on and see his reaction, but we have loss. A loss is recorded in the Bible. David was not immune from having personal loss in his life. But we're going to see in this book there will be other losses. But he's hearing this news. But while that was personal, and that's big, there were other things going on as well. It wasn't just personal. This is also the loss of the king. And if David was just ambitious, the people had loved him. He was accomplished in the battle. He had rose to fame. They had sang songs to him, but he did not want that personal ambition. But now, it's the loss of the king. Think that we have had times in our country, in America, where there's been an assassination. It's one of the most tragic things that can happen to a country. And there are those that are friends with the president, but the whole country is impacted, and then there can be anarchy. So who's going to reign? Who's going to lead? So we got that issue going on. Then there's also, who's responsible? We need to know more about what had happened. Just like what if another country had assassinated one of our leaders? So there's implications for Israel militarily. So really, here we are at the beginning of the sequel, but I'm going to leave today as a little bit of a cliffhanger. We're going to see how all these things go on, but we're going to see David's personal grief and his response to it. We're going to eventually see, the transition that's going to take place with Israel and the leadership of it. And of course, there's going to be military battles. It's an exciting story. At times, it's a very uplifting story, and at times, it's a very sordid story. And the Bible, is true in all this. So it's going to be a very different book than the letter we had in 1 Timothy. There's a lot of history in this, but we always want to circle back. And so I think the thing I'll leave us with today is dealing with personal loss. And it's part of our life in this world that we lose people that we love. And David lost people that he loved as well. And it's okay to grieve for them. But we also move on. And part of this story is going to be in 2 Samuel. This is the moving on. It's the end of Saul's time, and sadly it was the end of Jonathan's time. But for David, it's the end of that time he had with him, but it's also a time of a new beginning for him. And we're going to see where he takes things next. So I'll leave us with this cliffhanger, and we will look forward to many more weeks of studying this great story, this true story that we have recorded for us in 2 Samuel.